Hey there, folks. Trubie here, once again to talk to you about Dice Masters. It's the day after Christmas. I'm hoping all of your Christmas wishes came true, and well, one of mine did. We got our first look from WizKids looking at the, sorry, I'm one man show here, the Warhammer 40k box. What little we know about it is it's going to be the Death Guard versus Ultramarines, so basically Space Marines versus Chaos, which is pretty awesome. And we also learned that there are going to be team packs. So our first two team packs will be Orcs, Warg, and Space Wolves. Interesting that they're doing two different factions of Space Marines. So we'll have the Ultramarines and the Space Wolves instead of like Eldar or something. But Space Wolves are pretty cool. Yeah, as I'm sure our little friend here can attest to. She obviously loves the Space Wolves. And she's adorable. So, yeah, if a faction can inspire that, it's worth having in Dice Masters. But, yeah, that is what we've seen so far. There was an article out talking about just the MSRP. These are targeted for July. So, hey, happy birthday to me. That's actually sooner than I'd hoped. I was expecting to see them like next Christmas season or next fall. But, hey, if they end up coming in the summer, that's awesome. So, now down to business. Last time we were talking about win conditions. And if you'll remember, let me switch over to this view. We had our team of Dum Dum Dugan. Oops, I didn't want to bring him in quite yet. We had our team of Dum Dum Dugan, Madam Web, Captain America, and Alfred Pennyworth. These were our win conditions. And after this, I was actually talking to one of my former colleagues at the reserve pool, Michaela, and she'd been doing a similar Dum Dum build, except instead of using Madam Web, she was using Spider-Man, War of the Heart, which he's got a wall of text here, but basically when he attacks, when you attack with your sidekicks as well, your opponent has to declare blockers for all of your sidekicks before they can block any of your characters. So if you are getting all these characters out with or all these sidekicks out with Captain America. You have Spider-Man fielded, you attack with Spider-Man Alfred, who's also a sidekick, so he has to be blocked as well. And Dum Dum, send them at your opponent, they have to block the sidekicks. Dum Dum and Spider-Man are likely to get through. And also Spider-Man has the extra caveat where your sidekicks take no damage. So if they attack and they're blocked, they're not going to get knocked out. So he's actually a pretty good fill-in for Madam Web. Madam Web's a rare, and Spider-Man here just comes in the Maximum Carnage team pack, so it's right there, freely available. So I actually do like that a little bit better. Madam Web's still strong, though. So we talked about our main win conditions. Now, from that, we have still 4 slots left, and those are basically going to be our support cards, or our, yeah, we'll just say support cards. But there's going to be a bunch of subsections here. I'm going to go over them kind of quick, so if there are more questions, feel free to leave a comment on this video or contact me directly. Once again, we have our 4 Horsemen Dice Masters group, 4HMDM, so just search that on Facebook or just search 4 Horsemen Dice Masters. Find us easily enough, send us messages there, and I can answer them. But yeah, so we have our win condition. So from here, we're going to want to have other things. So let's talk about ramp. Back in the old days, we had Professor X. He was like the first major ramp tool. And with him, you could pay mask and move up to 2 sidekick dice from your use pile to the prep area. That allowed you to accelerate your team. When you ramp up to get more energy to buy those big 6-7 cost characters. But he's now he's a Golden Age card. So he's not usually in Modern. You don't see him as much. I might do another video later on for our newer players explaining the difference between Modern and Golden. But Professor X was one of the first ramp cards. Well, first major ones. My first favorite, my first level comes to ramp, and the one that sort of opened up the game for me was the Kobold. That was the first time we saw Swarm. And Swarm is when the character is out, you draw one from your die, or draw a die of it from your bag, get to draw another die. So that would be another way to ramp up to get those big cards. The Kobold, unfortunately, has also been lost to Golden Age, but in the new D&D set, we have both Chwinga and Batiri Battlestack, who both have Swarm. So Swarm's still out there, and there's also Multiple Man. So yeah, there's lots of Swarm options still available. So that makes me happy. You also have basic action ramp. You have things like Resurrection or Superhero Registration Act. So with Resurrection, and there's also Villainous Pact, you pay a shield, and you can just draw a die from your bag and put it in your prep area. Then the next turn, you get to roll that die along with the 4 you draw. Then there's also Superhero Registration Act. It's an action, you use the action, and you get to draw and roll 2 dice, and it has a special thing, Enlistment. So instead, if your opponent does not knock anything out, you get to draw 3 dice and roll them. So that's 3 extra dice to add to your energy pool to buy those big things. However, one of the more interesting ramp cards that I think would work well with this team that I actually haven't used before, but I've seen a lot of people using well, is Hush. Hush is interesting because he's not really a ramp card, but he is. So while Hush is active, if a Batman character is in the field zone, KO Hush and add a die from your bag to the prep area. So he kind of acts like Resurrection in a way that when you field him, you're going to draw something and put it in your prep area. But here we're going to have Alfred out. And so Hush is going to trigger every time and just be knocked out all the time. And he's a shield character, so those shields would help go into the Captain America global. So the field sidekicks, and we're also prepping dice. So yeah, it's going to be a nice little fit for this team. But that goes over our quick things with ramp, and there's a lot of other ways you can use ramp. There's Fabricate, which allows you to knock out characters, and just knocking out those characters, you get to roll them the next turn to have more dice. You can just send your stuff at your opponent and have them block it, and if they block it, it's knocked out. Then you get to roll more next turn. There's lots of ways to ramp, but in this case, yeah, we're going to try the Hush ramp, because I think that's a pretty neat thing to use. So that gives us 3 more slots. Another thing there is removal. Removal is something that Melissa gets on me, because I always, she'll have her team all put together, and I'll be like, oh, well, what's your removal? And the reason to have removal is there's always that one card that can trip you up and completely shut down your strategy. You need a way to get around that card that's blocking your strategy. So one way to do that is just by pure damage. If you can just deal 3 damage, 4 damage to a character and take it out, there you go. That's a way to get rid of it. So you're removing, like with Nightwing here. When he attacks, deal 4 damage divided any way you choose among up to 4 target opposing character dice. So attack with Nightwing. Say they've got something that's preventing your sidekicks from doing damage, or preventing Dum Dum from attacking. You can attack with that. Hopefully that's enough damage to knock it out. If not, there's also things like Magic Missile. Magic Missile has the Bolt Global, where you can just deal 1 damage to target character die, and that's one of your basic actions. Or it also has the deal 2 damage to target character die or player if you actually use the action. So you could either burn your opponent or burn down some of their characters that are causing you problems. That's damage. There's also reroll removal. Early on, there was Storm Windrider, who would, when you fielded her, you would reroll characters, and if they rolled energy, they'd be moved to the use pile. More recently, we have stuff like Black Cat. When fielded, reroll target opposing character die. If the result is not a character face, place that die in your opponent's use pile. There's also, in the X-Men set, there's the rare Storm that has Awaken. When you spin her up, you target one of your opponent's characters to reroll, and if it rolls energy, it goes to the use pile. That's the problem with the reroll removal, is it's kind of 50-50 depending on what you're targeting. If you're just targeting a sidekick, then it's a 1 in 6 chance it comes back. If it's targeting a character, there's a 50% chance it's going to just come back. So it's not the most reliable form of removal. We also have force block and force attack removal. So in this case, we're talking about globals, like Wasp has Pay a Mask, target character die must block this turn. Or Bane, you did use this during your opponent's turn. Pay a Fist, target opposing character die must attack. So if there's something that's really giving you trouble that it's not too big, you could either force it to attack with Bane and just let it through, take the damage. Sometimes you're better off taking that damage than having that thing out. Or if you've got some big attacker like Dum Dum, you could say Pay a Mask, force the thing that's giving you trouble, make it block, and attack with Dum Dum, deal like 8 damage to it, and it's very likely going to get knocked out. And there's other cards that have force block mechanics, like there was Madam Web. If you're just forcing everything to block her, then that's a form of removal, and you can choose for her damage to go onto the problem character. There's also Denial. Like early on, there was a Loki Gemkeeper, which when you had him out, your opponent wouldn't be allowed to field a certain character. Now, more recently, we have Blob, Appetite for Destruction. When fielded, choose an opposing card, canceling all previous choices. Your opponent may not purchase or field that card's dice until Blob leaves the field zone. So, there's another one that if they have something that's problematic for your team that's going to keep you from losing, or keep you from winning, you would buy that as quickly as possible, get it out, and shut it down so you aren't going to have that going up against you. It's a nice way to slow down your opponent. We also have, there's a lot of options for this, things like Intimidate and Capture. So in this case, we have Falcon here with the keyword ability Intimidate. Intimidate basically just removes a die from the field till the end of turn, and if that die had an effect that was causing you problems, that die is now gone till the end of turn, so you can get in and do your damage or get your attack through. Capture is very similar, except it'll be a certain die taking control of that, or taking that die off the field, and sometimes capture will last multiple turns. It just depends on the capture. A recent example is Dupe, the uncommon Dupe, that he has Awaken, and when he spins up, he can capture a target opposing die. So if you spun him up twice, you could actually capture 2 dice, but that'd be the extent of it. And then lastly, when it comes to removal, we have something like Blanking. And you're likely to see this card a lot. She's a pretty popular one these days. Shriek, Sonic Beam. When fielded, choose an opposing character card, replacing all previous choices. While Shriek is active, ignore that card's text. This is a very strong card that you're going to see on most high-level teams these days. It basically is shutting down one of your opponent's cards. Problem is, if everyone has it, then it sort of negates the slot, so you're both just going to sit there and I'm going to shriek your thing, but you're going to shriek my shriek, so then it's all null and void. But if you have a second form of removal to make sure that their shriek stays off the field, or you put something like Blob out and target their shriek, then you can have your shriek and Blob. But yeah, that's getting into a lot of metagame and trying to figure out the best way to handle it. So yeah, that's our removal stuff. Then you have stuff like metacalls. And metacalls are sort of responding to what your local events are like. So if you have someone who's going around and playing a sidekick team, just pumping up sidekicks and getting through for a lot of unblockable damage or something, you could add something like Dr. Light to your team. This is the rare Dr. Light from Green Arrow Flash. While Dr. Light is active, opposing sidekicks deal you no combat damage. So all of a sudden, sidekicks are completely harmless to you. You could also do something like if they're using Firefly and just burning you with Firefly all the time, you could add something like Wonder Woman Reflections to your team. And she's while Wonder Woman is active, when fielded and when attacks abilities are ignored. So now Firefly, his when fielded ability, doesn't happen. It wouldn't deal you any damage. Similarly, if there is a global that's causing you problems, like if your opponents are always using Magic Missile. In this case, we have our little weak sidekicks, and we've got Dum Dum, whose defense isn't that big, and we want them out. Well, then you might want to have something like Wonder Woman Wonder Woman Child of Clay. While Wonder Woman is active, global ability is active. Sorry, I'm getting mush-mouthed as I try to rush through this. Try not to take too long. But while Wonder Woman is active, global abilities activated by your opponent cannot target character dice you control. So that would protect all of your dice from Magic Missile. It would also protect all of your dice from Bane's Global. It would protect from Wasp's Global. So yeah, Wonder Woman here is a really great card. There's also a card called Blink Transmutation, which that allows your opponent to basically just sit on a mask, and when you attack, they can just spend a mask to send your attacking character back and have them deal no damage. That's one of those cards that has caused me a lot of trouble in the past. Wonder Woman shuts that down, so you're good to go then. Lastly, one of my favorite new meta calls is Bishop, Butterfly Effect. So while Bishop is active, prevent all non-combat damage dealt to you. So I think on a lot of the current teams that are going around, you're going to see stuff like this Firefly, who just deals burning direct damage to you, and people are using the rare Cosmic Cube to amplify that damage and do even more to you. And Bishop here is a wonderful stopgap. Just, no, you're not dealing me any damage. So I really like Bishop. Of course, then you got to worry about Shriek blanking him. But the hope is, well, if they're buying their Shriek, then they're not buying. If they're buying Shriek to stop your Bishop, well, in the meantime, you're buying stuff that is going to hopefully get you the win. But yeah, that is it in a nutshell, like what our options are. So now we have to narrow things down and actually decide what we want to do and what our meta calls are going to be. So for me, with this team, with the Dum Dum, Captain America, I do really love Bishop. So Bishop is a must-have for me. I think he's a great card, and I'm basically going to play him on pretty much every team for a while, until I decide not to. Also, he's a shield, so he fits in with our synergy. I think he's a great card. See, we also had Hush, who we're having in here for our ramp card. I am actually going to stick with Wonder Woman Child of Clay for the global protection, because really we need to have our characters fielding, and we need to be able to stop. We need to make sure that we're able to get through for damage, and that they're not going to be able to ping off our sidekicks. And for the last piece, yeah, I think this is sort of a do what you will, do what thou wilt moment. The safe answer is just say Shriek. Usually, if there's a question, throw in Shriek. It's a safe call, but you might not want her. So you might go with something like, once again, this is a meta call point. I might want to go with Blob instead, because he's almost just as good, and if my opponent is using Shriek, I can hopefully use Blob and get that out before they get Shriek, and then I'll still be able to get Bishop out and prevent any damage they're going to do. So yeah, I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, that's basically the team right there. Those are going to be our meta calls. The other thing we still have to worry about, though, is our basic actions. That could be a whole nother subject, but just to keep it safe, or to keep it safe and easy, I think the basic action I'm going to want to use here, because of all the shields I've got, and I'm going to have Hush and everything, I'm going to use Splinter's Teachings, mostly for the global, which is pay a shield, swap the attack of target character die you control, and target opposing character die. So, if we have Wonder Woman Child of Clay, that means that our opponent can't use that against us. And even if we haven't gotten to the point where we have Wonder Woman out, if Dum Dum is out and he's attacking, if they transfer Dum Dum's attack off of him, he still gets the +1 attack from all the sidekicks. He would only lose the 3 attack, or 2 attack. And that is because of the difference between static bonuses and applied bonuses, and I think that's a subject for another video. But, and I still have one more basic action I can fit in. Once again, this is sort of a do what thou wilt moment. Anything you really want in there. I have a lot of low-cost characters, so I might actually go with Big Entrance. It's a card that is good in the beginning of the game. It discounts your purchases by 1. So I've got all these 2 costs with Alfred and Dum Dum. So I can just spend a bunch of energy, get Dum Dum, get Alfred, get Hush, all for 1 energy each, and throw them directly into my bag. That's the power of Big Entrance. But later on in the game, big entrance does become a bit of an obstacle. It sort of gets in the way because you are probably at the point where you've bought everything you want. And then unfortunately, there's no way to get rid of it, so you'll end up drawing it when you don't want it. But I think I've rambled long enough here. Hopefully, this gives you sort of an idea of the sort of thinking that goes into what you want to do and what your opponent's going to have, what works well on your team, and that's the thing with Dice Masters. It's a big open world. There's tons of things you can do with it, and even this team. I'm not saying this is at all a great team or a good team, but it'll be fun to play. I'll mess around with it and see what improvements I can make, and see how it handles at my store. But that's it for this week. If there are any questions, once again, feel free to send me messages on Facebook, post messages in the video here, or join us on Four Horsemen Dice Masters. That's 4HMDM. And I hope to see you all on Sunday. Oh, yep, that reminds me. We are looking like we're still good for January 7th is going to be our Thor release event. So, Thor coming up. Hope to see you then. Later.